Hello, friends. Welcome from across the country, wherever you're joining us from west to east to north. Delighted to have you with us today. A lot of others will join us here over the next minute, so we'll allow you to settle in. My name is Joel Thiessen. I am Professor of Sociology and Director of the Flourishing Congregations Institute, and delighted to have so many folks joining us today for this webinar. If you wouldn't mind just jumping into the chat, you can just write down who you are, maybe your role or capacity, and where in the country you're joining us from. And we'll do that by way of introduction as people are joining over the next minutes. And in about 30 seconds or so, we'll formally begin our webinar today. So again, delighted that so many are joining us for this webinar with Sam Reimer. Good to see folks here from different regions of the country. So, all right, I think we're good. I know folks will join over the next couple of minutes as we formally begin, but delighted to have so many people here for this webinar today. My name again is Joel Thiessen, and delighted to have you here for this webinar, Self-Spirituality in Your Church, Implications for Discipleship, with Sam Reimer, Professor of Sociology at Crandall University, a good friend and colleague, not just of me personally, but our team here at the Institute. Again, my name is Joel Thiessen, Professor of Sociology and Director of the Flourishing Congregations Institute. This webinar is the third of 4 this academic year, which will focus in different ways on some aspects of different internal markers of congregational flourishing. Sam's going to lead us with a 20-minute presentation, and then we'll open it up for 10 minutes of Q&A. For those who wish to raise a question, maybe something comes to mind as we hear Sam present, you're invited to do so in the Q&A function, and you'll see that at the top of your screen. And would encourage you to leave your questions in the Q&A section rather than the chat section. That'll help us monitor those as well. Following Sam's presentation after the Q&A, for those who wish to stick around for further discussion with others who are joining us today for breakout discussion, we'll do so for about 15 minutes. And again, that's open to any and all who wish to join us in that respect. So I'm going to hand it over to Sam. He's going to share his screen, lead us over the next 20 minutes. And so, Sam, delighted to have you with us today, and we'll hand it over to you.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Joel. I really recommend to everyone listening that you keep track of what's happening at the Flourishing Congregations Institute that Joel leads, doing wonderful work there, and you'll want to know what they're up to as they continue to crank out some really interesting studies. So, yes, thanks for joining us today, folks. Delighted to be part of this. What I plan to do in the next 15-20 minutes is 3 things. The first one will be explaining what I think underlies the change in religiosity and spirituality in Canada today. It's a glacial, huge change that we call the move to an internal locus of authority. The second thing I'm going to do is explain the self-spirituality that has resulted from this change. And finally, I'm going to try to highlight some implications for discipleship in your church. So I hope that's helpful. The glacial shift I'm talking about, this huge cultural shift that has been going on at least since the 1960s, is illustrated by this first slide. A move from the left to the right. Please read both parts of the phrase on the right, both the black and the pink. This crowd will not be surprised when I tell you that religiosity is declining in Canada. This graph here from our friend Rick Eamstrad, the Evangelical Fellowship of Canada, sort of demonstrates weekly attendance since 1946, when we're about 2/3 of Canadians said they were at church every week, until now. And right now, my most recent data suggests it's about 12% of those who claim to attend weekly or so, which is kind of a loose category. But my guess is in real life, since people tend to exaggerate their church attendance, it's probably in single digits. Not only that, we have seen a decline in orthodoxy and orthopraxy. By orthodoxy, I mean established beliefs that the Christian church has historically ascribed to, that we find captured in things like the Apostles' Creed. And by orthopraxy, I mean authorized practices. And external authority, usually denominational leaders, will define what the correct beliefs are and what the correct practices are for that group. We're seeing a decline in those things. And I'm going to suggest today that the main cause of this has been what we call the inward turn. Philosophers and sociologists have called it subjectification, the inward turn, the move toward individualism. This is part of that. All these trends that we've seen since at least the 1960s and probably as far back as the Enlightenment. In general, I call this change a move from external authority to internal authority. And this is a continuum. The people in your pews are going to be somewhere on this continuum between external authority, and those who are older and those who attend more regularly will tend toward the left end, the external authority end, and those who are younger and attend less often will tend toward the internal authority. The point here, and this is what I want to be clear about, is that society in general is pushing us toward internal authority. This is not just in Canada. This is at least true of all Western countries and true of also a bunch of other non-Western countries, including parts of Asia and South America. So this is a huge trend. One of my favorite illustrations of this trend is the US Army, which is very apropos for a pacifist Canadian Mennonite like myself. In the World Wars, during the World Wars, 1919-ish to about 1945, this was the U.S. Army's recruitment strategy. They put posters up all over the place that included a picture of Uncle Sam, of course, representing the U.S. government, and telling people that it was their job to go to the nearest recruiting station because Uncle Sam asked them to. Note the assumptions of this poster. The assumptions are that you should defer to an external authority, i.e. the government, and that you have a duty to this external authority, which requires you to serve them even with your life. Now, you won't be surprised that come around the 1960s, this method of recruitment was not working as well. For those of you who remember the 1960s or know something about them. Instead, it took them about 20 years to realize that they needed to change strategies. And by 1980, they came up with this new strategy. Be all you can be. In other words, the U.S. Army is here to help you develop yourself. It is not about deference to an external authority. It's about an external authority's or an institution's ability to help you reach your whole self, to become all you can be. So this is really about you and not about an external authority. So let me sort of unpack here external authority versus internal authority. By external locus of authority, I mean normally institutional authorities that have the right to guide our lives or direct us. This would include things like parents and pastors and politicians and teachers and doctors and everybody else. Deference then was the correct posture to these external authorities. In fact, it was expected that we would serve our churches or our schools or whatever else in the ways that we could. Thus, beliefs, behaviors, and aspirations were prescribed. Society expected people to abide by the external authorities' prescriptions, particularly what we should believe, how we should behave, and what we should aspire to be. Identities were ascribed, that means largely defined by birth, and fairly stable over the life course. So all these things were directed by external authorities shaping how we viewed ourselves and what we thought we should do and believe, including, of course, churches. The glacial shift I'm referring to has moved us toward internal locus of authority. By this, I mean individual now has the authority over his or herself. No longer is the expectation that we defer to an external authority, but we are our inner self, our inner life, our intuition, our heart directs us in what we should do. Therefore, our attitudes toward institutions like churches or anything else is consumeristic. We selectively choose those things that we think are going to help us as we on our trek toward personal wholeness and personal fulfillment. So we pick and choose those parts that make sense. Our beliefs, behaviors, and aspirations then are discovered. We have to discover them. The individual has to discover them for themselves because each person is unique, and therefore each person's path is unique as well. So we discover what we believe along the way, even if there's certain voices that can help us and guide us along the way. It's up to us to decide those things. Identities then, who I am, is something that I also have to discover. And so it is something that I create on my own journey, and it is flexible. It changes over time as I understand more in myself. Let me be clear. I meant to say this at the beginning, but let me be clear that I'm describing and not prescribing. I hope everybody's clear about that. I'm being the sociologist here who's describing what I see as the major cultural zeitgeist of our time. This is the way society is moving. All right. This major glacial change has been huge since the 1960s. Last 75 years, we've been moving this direction. So the baby boom was particularly an important generation that moved us in this direction. And this has reshaped all major institutions, education, media particularly, but it also has reshaped religion. It has moved us toward self-spirituality. And so I'm going to define the self-spirituality a bit for you. One would assume, as I did when I began my study, that self-spirituality would be very idiosyncratic and diverse. If everybody is on their own path to find their own selves, their own true self, then we should have as many paths, as many spiritualities as there are individuals out there. But instead, what I found when I examined people who've done a lot of research on Western spirituality is that there was a surprising uniformity. That is, society was powerful enough to prescribe a kind of spirituality that showed uniformity across Canadians and across Western countries in general. This spirituality has a clear means, that is how we get to our end goal, and a clear end, that is our telic end that we're trying to reach. So let me describe this for you. Of course, this varies by individuals, but this is the general pattern. First of all, as I mentioned, we get to our spiritual goal by private journey. I am in charge of my own spirituality, and while there might be some guides along the side, some people who are helpful, maybe a parent or a pastor in this quest, it is up to me to decide where I'm going and how I get there, because I am unique. No one is exactly like me, so no one can prescribe exactly what I should become or how I should get there. All religions are basically the same in this sort of generic Canadian spirituality. This is called perennialism, for those of you like big words. This means that all spiritual paths, regardless of the religion you choose or an eclectic mix of religions that you might choose, all can help us get to where we want to go. So people who realize that all religions are basically the same, which is about making people feel better and getting them to be nice and accepting of other people, they all do that. And those religious people who insist on their own unique brand as being uniquely right aren't yet enlightened. My heart tells me what is right. My friend Galen Watts calls it religion of the heart. And we have, in big words, an inner epistemology. How do I know what is true? The answer is my heart tells me so. I know what is right, wrong, good, bad, everything else by a sense, inner sense, by sense inside, by my intuition. In order for me to find my own path, I need a lot of personal liberty. I don't want people trying to tell me what to do and conform me into their image or their expectations of me. I need a lot of freedom to find my own way. I need a lot of freedom to test out a variety of beliefs, behaviors, and identities in order to reach my end goal. Finally, God is moved. He's no longer, or she or it or whatever, is no longer on the throne in heaven, but exists inside of me. Has become reified. I am part of a larger divine energy that exists within probably all created things. And I know what is right. In fact, finally right when my heart tells me so. So this is the way we get to this, the means of this spirituality. And the end goal of the spirituality is to find the authentic self. This is a buzzword that we see for media and other places where people are looking to find their authentic self, or they say that person is not being authentic. This assumes that there is a false self, that there is a fabricated self, and that the discovery of the authentic self requires us to look beyond or maybe above the false self. The false self is one that has been misshaped by societal obligations and expectations of who I should be. I need to find my own authentic self. How will I know when I find my own authentic self? Well, that's kind of hard because everybody is on the path. One, all paths have to sort of find their own end. So what I exactly look like or who I am varies because it is up to me. I'm a unique person, but I will know when I find my ends, my authentic self, if I'm good. That is, the authentic self is kind, it is just, it is accepting, it is tolerant, and it is generally nice, which Canadians are known for. It is also powerful. When I begin to find my authentic self, I uncover my personal superpower, my unique abilities. And once my unique, surprisingly powerful identities or abilities have been discovered, then I know I've reached my authentic self, and other people should affirm that. Most importantly, the authentic self is marked by peace. I have a sense of inner peace. So the authentic self, as pictured in much internet research, looks like a swan peacefully gliding majestically on calm waters, peaceful waters. I might have started out as an ugly duckling because people didn't understand me, but when I reach my authentic self, everybody will affirm that I am a beautiful swan I was made to be. All right. So what are the results of this self-spirituality? Well, just quickly, this is reshaping beliefs, in fact, actually what beliefs are, and practices as well. So beliefs now are based on what I sense inside as right or wrong, what resonates with my inner self. Beliefs tend to, spirituality tends to soften controversial beliefs. So if a religious group has strict views on, say, sexuality or other things that limit someone's ability to express themselves, or if they have beliefs that are, I just lost the word, beliefs that are that reject other people's beliefs, that is not supportive of everybody's individual beliefs. Exclusive beliefs is the word I'm looking for. So exclusive beliefs are not popular because if everybody is on their own path to find their own authentic self, then we need to accept everybody's efforts to find their beliefs and practices without being exclusive about certain people's are right or wrong. It would be unauthentic in an extreme to tell someone else their hard-found authentic self is actually wrong or not good. What I found when I talked to evangelicals in their churches in Britain and Canada was that it was quite common for people to disagree with certain church teachings. These certain church teachings, which might have been orthodox, were not widely accepted among people simply because it did not resonate with what they thought was right or wrong. So they're quite comfortable, including people in your pews, by the way, to disagree with certain teachings that don't resonate. Practices. Practices are no longer specifically about longer, regular, stable church, disciplines, spiritual disciplines, but more focused on how they make me feel, whether this is a therapeutic thing for me. So I will tend to do spiritual practices when I sense a need inside. Thus, spiritual practices tend to be sporadic, what I call cell phone spirituality. Spirituality becomes much more like the use of an app on your phone. I pull it out or I use it when I sense a need to do so. So what that means is I pick and choose beliefs as I find them useful, find them helpful. So you can think of the spiritual options that your church offers and like a buffet. And I will, as an internal locus of authority person, pick and choose those that resonate. All right. In my study, I asked pastors to identify for me regular church-growing evangelicals in a variety of age categories. What I found was that these active evangelicals in evangelical churches, 3/4 of them showed evidence of internal authority. By that, I mean some way that they rejected external authority, most commonly disagreeing with a established church teaching. By the way, I also interviewed their pastors, so I knew what those were. All right, implications for discipleship. Hopefully, I'm going to sort of explain this, and I hope that this is something that might be useful and applicable for you in your church setting. Many Christians in your pews have an internal authority paradigm. They will interpret what clergy say based on it. So most clergy that I've run into, at least evangelical clergy that I talk to, have an external locus of authority. They defer to denominational and biblical teaching. And so when they get up in the pulpit and they explain the timeless truths found in the Bible, they assume other peoples are also deferring to them just like they are. When in fact, a lot of people in the pews with this internal authority are thinking, well, I'm glad this pastor is sharing what he really believes or she really believes because that's being an authentic self. But I have to decide what I believe on my own. There's a low interest in official church doctrine because I have to find my own way and figure out what I want to believe by myself. But it is useful for you to teach good values and to give us some practical hints about how I can live a good life. So that's really what they want, including, by the way, a lot of parents, including some evangelical parents. They want you to teach their kids good values. Since I'm on my own path, there tends to be low denominational or church loyalty. So if I'm on my own path and I'm in charge of finding my own spiritual destination, my authentic self, what that means is I will make use of church or church programs to the degree that I find them helpful. And when I no longer find them helpful, I will move on. Particularly, I will probably move on when you are not affirming enough of the direction I'm going. We pick and choose then religious options. This is based on, we've known this for a long time. Bibby, way back when he wrote Fragmented Gods, talked about religion a la carte. We pick parts of it. We say, I want this menu item, and I don't want the others. And that tends to be the way people with internal authority operate in the church. Worship and the therapeutic experience. what I have in mind here is because it is a religion of the heart, and the heart is sort of the center of the emotions. How I feel is very important. So those churches, those authority experiences, we talk about them as experiences. Concern here might be that they tend to be about the self and less about the one who is being worshipped. Holy Spirit and intuition. If the divine is inside of me, then the prompting of the Spirit might become indistinguishable from my own inner sense, my own intuition. So when we are taught by religious authorities that the Holy Spirit gives us a sense of peace when we're making the right decision, that resonates well, because that's what they're looking for. If we say the Holy Spirit will convict you of sin or might ask you to do things that are way past your comfort zone, that would not resonate as well. Finally, I think the major hurdle to discipleship is this issue of lordship and internal authority. Lordship is deference to an external authority. It is deference to God. If God is Lord, that means we follow what God says, and we don't get to pick and choose the parts that we like. We accept the whole thing. And so if I am operating on lordship, then I am deferring to an external authority by definition. This bumps against an internal authority and might be the biggest hurdle that clergy have to deal with when we think about this move toward an internal locus of authority. Thanks, everyone, for listening. I turn it back to Joel.
Fantastic. Thank you, Sam. We'll open it up for some questions, and we'll have you, Sam. I will stop sharing your screen, and we'll have a bit of a conversation on some questions that others have, and I have a few for you as well. So your book is excellent. People should pick it up. She should read it. My question for you, you write about evangelicals here and this shift from external to internal authority. Is this specific to evangelicals, or is this prominent among other streams of Christianity? What does your research and interactions suggest there?
Yeah. When I started this, Joel, I had in mind that if there is people who are still operating with external authority, it's probably going to be church-going evangelicals. So this was kind of my most difficult litmus test, if you like, to see if this was true. And when I found how widespread it was among church-going evangelicals, I would be surprised if that wasn't true of, say, other Christian groups, say Catholics or mainline mainstream Protestants. So the research suggests that this is widespread across religious groups, not only in Canada, but around the world. So varying, of course, by individuals and age and commitment to external authorities like lordship. It would cause the variance here.
Sure. Do you see any changes in our Canadian culture that shift us back to external authority, or have we crossed the point of no return as you look at sort of social changes and shifts and impacts on religious life?
Yeah. I haven't seen clear to me reason to believe that we are shifting back to maybe a more balanced position. I would still that people sense or people assume that they are operating with internal authority when indeed they are not. And there's a bunch of external things to them that are actually acting as authorities to them. Those might be their friends. There might be online algorithms, and maybe even sometimes pastors or parents. But we all are operating with external authority. And so we all have small L lords, if you like, shaping our lives.
Yeah. I don't know if this is a fair question, but how would you encourage pastors or church leaders to respond to some of these dynamics? Is this just something like, there's nothing you can do, this is just how people will operate moving forward, or how do church leaders gently navigate some of those realities?
Right. So what I would encourage church leaders to think about is that help people break down this idea of internal authority, which is a bit not real. which is actually not real at all. In fact, everybody has external authorities. Everybody is being shaped by forces outside of themselves. I would have to hand in my badge as sociologist to argue otherwise, right, Joel? And the question they need to think about is, do the authorities that shape you, machine-created algorithms or human authorities like your friends, are they really a benevolent master? Do they really care about you? Do they actually have your flourishing in their best interest and are willing to sacrifice to help you get there? If we all are shaped by external authorities, then the fundamental question is your Lord a benevolent one?
Yeah. I have two follow-up questions. The first one, and whether, again, with your sociological hat, you can or want to or not in this respect, how do you reconcile Ignatian practices around discernment and what seems like a locus toward rejecting things like emotions, for example, is one of our webinars using this question.
Yeah, it's a great question. I'm not super familiar with a lot of Ignatian spirituality, though. I have used it.
How do you reconcile Ignatian practices around discernment and what seems like a locus toward rejecting things like emotions, for example?
Yeah, it's a good question. And that's a tough balance because this notion. So I guess the question is, we would want our individual spirituality to be supported by, in my tradition, really big on corporate discernment. And so that's going to become increasingly important for the Christian church to hear other spiritual people support where I think the Spirit is leading me. And also to be aware that sometimes the Spirit does indeed ask us and guide us in ways that are not comfortable and making us feel good about ourselves even. So if we are attending to the Spirit, there might actually be things like conviction of sin or even pushing us to go beyond our comfort zone.
Yeah. One final question. Been different reports of late, reported religious revival among young people. We've seen reports like this in the US and the UK, more media attention given to this here in Canada. Curious your thoughts about that, and they're related to the shift of external, like, is this concentrated along certain generations or demographics, and how are these conversations possibly in conversation with one another?
Yeah, I don't want to be one to poo-poo the work of the Spirit, but as a sociologist, I have a variety of other explanations which might explain why some polls are picking this up. Pew has argued for a lot of the polls that are picking this up are actually opt-in polls, which are not as good as probabilistic representative samples, so it could be a sampling bias. Other things could be the fact that we have emerging adulthood, which means young people are hanging around their parents' home longer into their 20s and 30s, definitely. And as a result, they still might be abiding by parental standards instead of, being fully free, if you like, to find out their own standard when they live by themselves or separate from parents. Another option might be that we know that immigrants in Canada tend to be more more religiously committed than do native-born Canadians. And as a result of that and the fact that they have more kids, we could be seeing a little bit of a bump related to that. So I'm not convinced of that. And the other side of this is that we could have people coming to churches and seeking out spiritual guidance for reasons that we might not consider the best regions. For example, therapeutic reasons. I'm not at all saying that it's not good that people are checking out churches and that that's a key first start to opening up a spirituality, an orthodoxy and orthopraxy. But I am suggesting that their motive might be less about sort of a deeper devotion and more about a sense of well-being.
Yeah, no, very good. Thank you, Sam. And as you know, I mean, lots of us are thinking about this within the field and certainly trying to help church leaders and media and so forth think through some of these reports. So I think this is really helpful. Again, just want to encourage folks. Here's Sam's book, Caught in the Current. I would strongly encourage you to pick it up. It's been super helpful for my own work and research in sociology of religion and some of our work on congregations as well. So I want to encourage folks to pick that up and just really appreciate your presentation today, Sam, helping us to think carefully about these dynamics. I want to also alert everyone who's joining us today. I'm just going to share my screen here to our upcoming webinar with a mutual friend of both Sam and myself and others at the Institute. At our next webinar on Friday, March 20th at 1 p.m. Mountain Time with Lindsay Calloway, who will share from a recent released study, Women in the Canadian Evangelical Church. And the title of her webinar is The Varied Landscape of Women's Church Experiences. So encourage you to register for that. You see the QR code there. You can also find information on our website about that. Encourage you to share that with others as well to join us. As Sam kindly mentioned at the start of our webinar, we do have a number of other resources here at the Flourishing Congregations Institute, and we exist to provide Canadian data for Canadian church leaders. And so we try to provide as many resources as we can, some from our own work and much that's curated from our friends and colleagues across the country. And so I would encourage you to scan the QR code. You can access more free resources on our website and access more recent data on different aspects of congregational life in Canada. You can join other webinars like this, and we have different church training resources as well on our website that you're welcome to access through there as well. Finally, for those who want to hang around, you don't have to, of course, but for anyone who wants to maybe pick up some of these ideas over 10 or 15 minutes with some other practitioners and church leaders, both Sam and myself are going to hang around, and depending how many want to stick around, we'll either join in some smaller groups or we'll come together, but a few questions that will guide some of our breakout group discussions as well. So on that note, for those who are not sticking around, just want to thank you so much for joining today. Hope this has been helpful, meaningful. Want to encourage you to share some of this material with others in your own networks, and wish you a fantastic weekend. And we will share these resources next week. We'll hit your inbox as well with a recording from today. So thanks again for joining, everyone. Want to wish you a great weekend, and we'll give a little bit of time here for those to sign off who are, and then for those who are sticking around, we'll kind of gather ourselves for the next 10 or 15 minutes. So thanks again for joining today.